So
to
I would
write
just
this.
like to say, we're joined today by Lady Black, Barbara Amiel, and her new book, Friends and Enemies, a Memoir. Thank you for joining us today. Why did you decide to write this memoir?
I think it was sadomasochism. I lost 1.5 inches while writing it. You know, there's so many reasons why you do this. I am a writer by profession. You use all the material you have around you, whether it's, you know, column or, we used to joke, my husband and I, that when somebody said reach for the salt at breakfast, who's going to get that column topic? I think I wrote it to try and understand essentially what had happened in my life. And I'd read so many accounts of myself, and people had been saying such horrid things that I thought they couldn't make them all up. I probably was horrid, and I better sort of straighten out in my own mind why. I didn't even think about publishing it, although I had a contract, but the contract was in 2005. So you can see,
you cut out.
It's been a long time. And I think I wrote it partly to sort out who I was. The title Friends and Enemies does make it sound like a book of vengeance, and I probably should have dropped that title. It's just that it came into my mind when I started in 2005, and I just stuck with it. And I sorted things out. Probably it was a little bit therapeutic, and more, it was an extraordinary exercise. And I haven't said this to anyone else, but it was an extraordinary exercise in writing, because I think that essentially one's life, unless you are, you know, Einstein or Maria Callas, is boring. Everybody goes through difficult times, absolutely everybody under the sun. And so it became an exercise in just making the prose as good as I could make it.
You know, it must be a very difficult task to go back and dissect one's own life. Did you learn anything about yourself in the process?
Nothing that I wish to share with you. Did I learn anything? Look, I really knew a lot of my weak spots and a lot of my faults. And I knew that although people in the press were writing about faults, they weren't really the bad ones. And so I thought that I might as well let it all go on paper. I don't think I learned anything new about myself, except that I had, even at this late stage in my life, the ability to concentrate very hard on a writing task, which took sort of 12 hours a day for 3 years once I actually got started properly.
You know, I'm going to preface this by saying, you know, at the back where you have your lists of your friends and your enemies, I really want to preface this by saying there are a lot more friends on the list than there are enemies. But would you say, do you hold grudges if you're on the enemies list at this point? Is there a chance to get off it and move into the friends category?
What a good question. You mean sort of rehabilitate yourself in my eyes? I don't think anybody would give a damn that they were on the enemies list. And I don't think anyone would want to rehabilitate themselves. They're probably quite proud of being there. And probably there's 1 or 2 people that I regret having put on that list. But essentially, the real enemies would never rehabilitate themselves, could never make peace with me, because they destroyed my husband's life for 15, 17 years. And that means they destroyed my life too. And you can't make up for time lost, particularly at our stage in life.
You know, you're a journalist by profession. How would you describe the state of journalism in the year 2020?
Well, it's very difficult, and I'm very glad that I'm not having to earn my living from it now. Print journalism is very difficult. It's underpaid. Newspapers are falling by the wayside. There's interesting online stuff, but there is so much stuff that sorting out what's good and bad is very, very difficult for a journalist. I think the best stuff is still some of the magazines which are going online, and they're refining their ability to go online and make it interesting for the readers. But it's a very difficult time for journalists.
Do you think social media and blogging has watered down the profession?
Yes, probably. And I don't really understand social media in the sense that it's, you know, how can you say anything in 140 words in Twitter although I understand that you can open that up later. But I don't think on social media you can examine real issues or controversial issues at all, because you get cancelled out. So there's this censorship that's moving in on journalists, and that's really very difficult too. You have to have the right views on things, or you may get cancelled or lose your job, and it's not a happy atmosphere to live in.
I'm not sure if this has always been the case, but it seems to me that journalists and media companies, they seem to have an agenda. Shouldn't journalism be unbiased and less interested in the outcome?
I'm sorry, I can't help laughing over that. Having an agenda. Look, newspapers by and large have an affiliation with some line of thought. In the Toronto Star, for example, it's written into their rules of being that they are a paper of the Liberal Party of Canada. So that's part of it, and you understand that, and that's absolutely fair enough if you're a journalist there. The National Post, while it didn't have rules like that, tended to be the opposition to the Liberal agenda. I think that in England, where there were at one point 12 functioning dailies, and that's where I was working for 20 years, you had a broad spectrum. You don't really have any broad spectrum of thought in Canada. It's pretty well ideologically all the same, except for occasional columnists in the National Post. But it's changed since my husband founded it.
You write in your book that right-leaning journalists have to work 3 times harder to get exposure. But I'd always thought that there was a clearer path to notoriety and success for right-leaning writers, because there were fewer people taking that view and by virtue taking those paid positions.
Actually, you are actually, I hate to correct you, but you are wrong. That would be true in England. In England, being a conservative, right-wing, or classical liberal, as I call myself, is nothing new. You can flourish there. The opposition will be tough, but you can flourish. In Canada, it's a completely different matter. I don't think I could get a column now in Canada. When I did, I was with George Jonas, who I eventually had to hire because he couldn't get hired. It was a very different matter. All you had was the Toronto Sun, which was a tabloid. You couldn't, I remember the managing editor of the Toronto Star wanted to hire me, but Bieland Hondrick put his foot down and said absolutely no. The Globe and Mail never offered me a job. It was, the notoriety is not a useful tool in writing. It means that you're notorious, but notorious for what? You want to be known for your writing, and your views hold you back. I mean, think of it now. I can't name, actually the National Post has a couple, but look, there's no one in CBC, not one single person, except for the occasionally token appearances of Ray, what is it, the chap that writes at the National Post, who's jolly good. He's the old curmudgeon.
I know who you're talking about. I'm drawing a blank, but I know.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank, and it's awful because I really admire him. And he has had his columns objected to on the newsroom floor. So it's never been easy in this country. Notoriety never helped. And in fact, people sort of thought you were putting on a shtick in order to get employment. And it didn't help you one bit. You just had to make sure that you researched harder, worked harder, rewrote longer.
Do you feel that right-leaning journalism has altered politics? Does it do you think it sets the stage for productive debate, or is it making it more divisive and antagonistic?
Well, I don't like the term right-wing journalism. I mean, if you ask me my views on a dozen issues, they would not be right-wing. I'm anti-capital punishment, I'm pro-choice, I'm for prison reform. You know, there's all sorts of things which I think probably wouldn't be considered right-wing. And one changes one's views as you go along. I'm pro-gay marriage. That was a view I came to. I was always pro-civil unions, but I came to see that marriage for gays was the proper thing to do. Your views evolve with life. In terms of right-wing journalism, I don't know whether you're talking about America or Canada. In Canada, there just isn't any serious right-wing journalism, except, as I said, for the columnists at the National Post. Canada is a soft left country, and it's a decent country. Its journalists are by and large decent, but they're not politically knowledgeable or historically knowledgeable in the way that they are in the United Kingdom.
Sorry, I said right wing, I meant right leaning. I apologize. I didn't mean to go so extreme. What I want, you write in your book, so you brought up you're pro gay marriage, but as an example, you write in your book about culture wars and a breakdown of debate. But then you back it up with the example about homosexuality, and it's brave to write about it now as it was in the 70s. I'm not reading this right, but what I mean to say is, haven't some issues been settled? Like, why is there still a need for debate on some of these line items?
Well, there isn't. All I was saying there was that you see, you've got to remember I'm pretty old. And when I was writing, say in the early 70s, when they were cracking down on the bathhouses and before Stonewall and things like that, to defend homosexuality was a relatively brave thing to do, to say that it ought to be legalized, that you ought not to. Even though the Wolfenden Report in England had long said that, it was still considered, editors got very antsy about it. Now that it's obviously, we all take any kind, practically sexual liaison for granted. It should have its rights. Nobody should be prosecuted for what they do in the privacy of their own homes or indeed out on the street. But now if I wrote a column criticizing any aspect of any of the homosexual culture in any way, just saying, look, perhaps it's not right to demand that there be quotas on the number of homosexuals or the number of LGBTQ people. Why not just pick everyone on merit and start forgetting about what they do in their private lives? You could get fired, because what would happen is you would get the activist homosexual lobby would get a petition against you. Advertisers could be boycotted and you'd be out. And that's why I say what all these movements need is a Voltaire. Somebody who will say, look, you have a right, I disagree with your opinions, but you have a right to them. And I don't think it's right if one says, I'm not sure that there should be a gay pride day. That's not an attack on homosexuality. It's just an attack on, should we have marches for every group? I'm perfectly happy with a gay pride day, but some people might not like it. But if you say, should we have it, you shouldn't be attacked for saying hate literature. That's all I'm saying. Does that make any sense to you, Jeremy?
Yes, it does. Thank you. You were a public figure before Conrad Black came into your life. What did what did your marriage do to your career and to your level of notoriety? How did that change your trajectory?
I really hate that word, notoriety. It has such negative connotations, but it's not inaccurate. You're not using it inaccurately. What happened to me when I married Conrad Black was that I went from a prize-winning columnist in the UK, where the press, I got press award and Woman of Distinction award. And the minute I married Conrad, I became seen as part of the enemy because I was on the other side of the desk. I was no longer in the newsroom. I was with the proprietors. And that was a bit of a handicap. My friends, who are all journalists in England, my good friends stayed with me, but other journalists were afraid to be with me because it would look like they were playing up to the proprietor's wife. Um, Obviously, Conrad brought with him many benefits. Mainly, he brought love into my life, and a non-neurotic love, and that was pretty terrific. And that was a first in my experience, and it's lasted to this day. Um, and he brought a whole new standard of living that had grave disadvantages. And he certainly thrust me into the spotlight in a way I didn't want to be thrust into the spotlight. I grew to like aspects of it because I'm a shallow person, basically. And I grew to like, being looked at when I walked into a restaurant, because you're with the proprietor. I grew to like the fact that I could always get tickets for anywhere, that I could get the best table anywhere. And that's pretty well fun. If you want to get last minute tickets for an opera that's sold out, it's terrific to have that. But the downside of it is that people become not envious, but they begin to resent. There's just too much of you around. There are just too many pictures of you. You just become too much for people.
You write a lot about your love of music in your book. I'm also a fan, although I think probably different genres. And the tune "Nobody Knows You When You're Down and Out" popped into my head a few times when as I was reading this, and I was just wondering, how did your friends react to you and treat you during Conrad Black's legal proceedings and eventual conviction?
Two sides to this. My friends in the UK, my close friends, were absolutely staunch. And I found that the UK friends were, by and large, staunch. Canada, I was different in that I didn't really have that many close friends. The two or three I did were pretty terrific. But all the people that I had met through Conrad took their distance, just almost unanimously. And once Conrad was in prison, I took my distance. I did not want to inflict myself on people anymore. And it was pretty tough on my friends, Jeremy. I mean, they kept getting called up for anecdotes about me. And you become a liability. I mean, why the hell should they have to keep dealing with the press on my behalf? So there's two sides to it. There's the fact that I withdrew, and there is the other side of the equation. People didn't want to know me anymore because we were toxic. We were no advantage to them. And in fact, we were a disadvantage. We could be seen as holding them. We were just a disadvantage. So I can't blame people. I mean, people have their own lives to get on with. Their lives do not center around my difficulties or Conrad's. And so you can't blame people for not cosseting you. And I don't. And there were a lot of people that I name in friends who I didn't see, but I knew were there, that if I had picked up the phone, they would answer. And on the rare occasions I did, they did. And just knowing that was a tremendous support. The ones I didn't like were the people who had known us, and instead of just using us as an occasional dinner table anecdote, we became a source of amusement, spite, and endless conversations which contained a fair amount of fiction.
You're now doing your book tour. I'm sure that's going to take up a lot of your time, but do you have other projects in mind? What's next for you?
Well, of course, in these wonderful COVID times, one doesn't do a book tour. One sits in front of a Zoom machine. And it's really infuriating because I've been isolated for the last 17 years for one thing or another. And I thought when I finish this bloody book, I'm going to go out. I'm going to have a fabulous time. I haven't been to a restaurant in years. COVID came and everything shut down. What I'm doing now is I'm getting through the publicity. We just moved, not really just, but we moved at the end of January. There are still boxes and boxes I haven't unpacked because I was editing galleys. Conrad was writing books, so that has to be done. I suspect we will move again. And yes, I've got the offer of a column, a weekly column, and I have to get my energy back to start that treadmill again. I want to do the next book, and I have some ideas, but they haven't really congealed. But you know, I can't not work. I mean, what am I going to do? Go to the manicurist and buy clothes? I work. That's life.
Sure. Well, that's everything I have today. So I just want to say thank you so much for setting aside a little bit of time for me. This was a treat, and good luck with your book.